At some point, everyone's thought about packing up and moving to a beautiful foreign land, with the magical country of Japan probably making it onto your fantasy list of destinations. I don't blame you. Japan is a beautiful country, filled with a deep Shaolin history, a breathtaking natural landscape, delicious food, and Studio Ghibli, to name a few. Tokyo is undeniably Japan's most well-known city, so you'd think moving there would surely be a no-brainer. But like with anywhere, there are downsides to moving to this buzzing city. From needing a translator when going to the hospital, to exhausting working hours, to scary natural disasters, here's 10 negatives to living in Tokyo, plus a bonus at the very end. 10. Finding a place to stay. If you're like most people, then the sound of high rent prices is a big red flag. Well, unfortunately, Tokyo's rent is one of the most expensive in the world, and for such a small country, this might be quite surprising to some. Tokyo's rent is double the national average, with a place costing $500 per month elsewhere in the country, coming in at $1,100 per month in Tokyo. Rent isn't the only cost you'll have to fork out for, as you might also need deposit money, agent commission, guarantor fee, and fire insurance, all of which can add up to quite a sum. If you're a foreigner, then I'm afraid finding somewhere to rent is made even more difficult, even if you can afford these sky-high prices. One of the reasons for this is that landlords and real estate agents are scared they will not be able to communicate properly with foreigners in English, as only around 20 to 30% of people in Japan are able to speak some form of English. It's hard to do business if you don't speak each other's language. Another reason is the flight risk of foreigners. As foreigners are usually only there on temporary visas, the Japanese are afraid they will leave without proper notice and handling of affairs. The third is the final and most stereotypical. Foreigners have a bad reputation of causing trouble, leaving trash everywhere, and just generally being loud as they try and soak up the experience of visiting such a beautiful country. 9. Overcrowded. Sumimasen means excuse me in Japanese, and it is certainly a phrase you will need to remember if you decide to move to Japan. The overcrowded nature of Japan can be frankly unbearable, as there are just too many people in one small place. Whether it be the tiny bus and train seats or the constant bumping into people wherever you go, you better be used to having minimal personal space if you end up moving to this fantastic city. You don't even want to get me started on commuting by trains during peak time. Absolute hell on earth. 8. Language barrier. If you're moving to a new country, then learning the native language would be a good step to take, but trying to learn Japanese can feel like an absolutely impossible task. If you're coming from English, then at least Spanish or French have similar alphabets, whereas Japanese is a whole different ballpark. This complexity isn't helped by the fact that Japanese communication is full of subtleties and indirectness, making communicating with a native a difficult task, even if you were to get grips with the grammar to this complex language. However, learning Japanese would be a very cool skill to have up your sleeve. 7. Getting a job. Want to get a job in Tokyo, but you don't want to be an English teacher? Then I have some bad news for you. Companies will mainly only hire those with decent Japanese skills and who are able to speak the language, so good luck finding a job if you have neither. There is a possibility of working in Japan without learning Japanese if you work for a foreign company such as Google or Amazon. But considering how competitive it is to get recruited by them, it's hard to say your opportunities are great in number. But what about the service industry, like working in restaurants or in convenience stores? Yes, you can work in those roles, but these types of jobs won't secure you a work visa, unfortunately. It's not impossible to get a job in Japan. It's just that knowing the language opens a lot of doors for you. 6. Work-life balance. If you're thinking of moving to Japan, you better enjoy working because you're going to be doing a lot of it. The work-life balance is very skewed here, with Japan having some of the longest working hours in the world. Nearly 1/4 of Japanese companies require employees to work more than 80 hours of overtime a month. A typical workday in Japan starts at 8:30 a.m. and crazily doesn't finish until 7 p.m. at night. Apparently, workers are even discouraged to take time off of work if a family member dies. You better make sure you enjoy your job if you plan on moving to Tokyo. 5. Carrying cash. If you thought using cash was a thing of the past, then think again. Having cash on you is an essential part of living in Tokyo, with pretty much every business accepting cash, but only about half of businesses taking credit or debit cards. If they do take cards, they're probably chains or major department stores. as if finding somewhere that accepts cards was a problem, there is also a charge to deal with as well. If you do use cards and you're not from Japan, then get ready to be hit with some hefty international transaction fees. So yeah, it may not be the worst thing to have to get used to, but carrying a wallet full of cash everywhere is a pain of the past you probably didn't think you'd need to deal with in the modern age. 4. Pollution. Tokyo has plenty of things going for it, but clean air certainly is not one of them. With all the city's economic growth comes a serious cost to the environment. According to a WHO survey, the degree of air population in Tokyo exceeded the standards of measuring air pollution. The people living in Tokyo have suffered from this suffocation since 1960. The air quality of Tokyo is worse than New York, if you can even imagine that. So, whilst Japan is home to heaven-like natural landscapes, Tokyo is covered in a hellish urban fog, which is sadly a common trait in most modern cities around the world. 3. Jaywalking. Whatever you do, don't jaywalk in Japan, as it is considered rude. Even if there are clearly no vehicles in sight, people tend to wait until the walking signs turn green. How bizarrely civilized! Whilst jaywalking might be technically illegal in the US, everyone still jaywalks and it isn't even considered taboo. Whilst this isn't the worst thing to abide by, as it will ultimately keep you safer from the death trap of the road, it's still an inconvenience to the day-to-day life. Getting on the locals' good side by not offending them wouldn't be a bad idea, however, so please, just follow the small inconvenient rules here. 2. Healthcare. If you need to see a doctor, then you might have to bring your own interpreter or translator with you. While we've already touched on the importance of learning the language, the emphasis on this is made even clearer when you realize that there is a severe shortage of English-speaking health professionals in the country, a fact which can make your visit less than ideal. Imagine being in a medical emergency, but being unable to communicate with the people who could really help you in your time of need. Sounds very stressful. Also, don't forget your health insurance card or you'll be in financial trouble as well as health-related trouble. 1. Natural disasters. If you're moving to Tokyo, then prepare to be hit with your fair share of natural disasters. You heard that right. About 205 of the world's largest earthquakes happen right here in Japan. In a quiet year, there are 3 or 4 noticeable earthquakes in Tokyo. When big events happen, such as the 2011 Tohoku earthquake, a given area may experience hundreds of earthquakes. Because Tokyo is partially coastal, there is a real chance that a significant earthquake could result in a tsunami. Before you cancel all your plans to move to Tokyo, then it's worth bearing in mind that Japan is probably the most earthquake-resistant country in the world due to its high engineering standards. However, no amount of engineering can make the impact of a large earthquake completely safe. Bonus: if you require a deep sense of home or belonging, you will never be fully assimilated here. You can be 99% Japanese and 1% Korean. You're not Japanese. Even if you know the language, culture, were born here, have a Japanese spouse, have citizenship, everything, etc., this is not your home. If you need to identify with your country of residence as your home, Japan is not for you. Don't be bitter about it, just accept it. If you're not self-aware and perceptive, Japanese behavior and customs are largely based on a situation's context and air. If you struggle at reading the air, then don't come to Japan. You'll step on everyone's toes and then react based on resentment when everyone gives you the cold shoulder. If you could look and behave anything less than impeccable by your peers' standards at all times, then you're just not perceptive and proactive enough. If you're looking for a spouse, you'll come here and be in awe of how well-kept, attractive, and good-mannered the Japanese people are. You may become idealistic about a future with one of them. You'll get married before you're ready because you didn't cultivate relationship experience in your home country and you were living a fantasyland lie of idealism so far in your relationship. You'll find yourself subject to the Japanese marriage system, often based on settling and stability rather than passion and love for one another. You can find that here too, but you need to be certain you have it instead of rushing it. Thanks for watching and learning about some of the negatives of this fantastic city. That's it for me, and I'll see you next time.